Oh shit, it's to review, get down! Yep, and me thinks it's time for another top 10 list. And it occurred to me recently that I've been to a few places around the world that are used as locations in video games. So with that in mind, here are the top 10 games that use actual locations as their settings. The rules for this list are only one per franchise, because otherwise you could fill this whole list with just Assassin's Creed games. Also to consider, games that include multiple locations do count on this list, however I will be picking the most iconic locations from those games. Additionally, in the event that a game does include multiple locations, I will only be talking about one of those locations, and therefore, any single location can only appear once on this list. And finally, this list is in no particular order. Right, that's the technical bollocks out the way, so on with the list! New York! Deus Ex! Though the Deus Ex series is what's called a location-hopping experience, I'd say that one of the more iconic locations to star in this franchise appears right at the very start of the first game. Opening up on Liberty Island in New York, this section of the game will take you to various locations around New York City, including Battery Park, along with Castle Clinton, Hell's Kitchen, LaGuardia Airport, all of which are real places that you can go and visit. And as a major bonus for you, if you ever happen to find yourself in New York City, then try going to the Empire State Building, as the architecture there was used as inspiration for the game BioShock. Boston! Fallout 4. Fun fact for you, I was actually in Boston not too long ago, and while I thought that place was an amazing city, I was severely disappointed by the complete lack of super mutants and radiation pools. But like with the first entry on this list, many locations from Fallout 4 are based upon their real-life counterparts and can be visited in real life. The MIT, Logan Airport, which is where the Brotherhood has still made their base. You can walk the Freedom Trail, but alas, you won't find the railroad at the end of it. Faneuil Hall, the Harbour, the baseball stadium, which is Diamond City, and if you're extremely unlucky, then you might find a settlement that needs your help. No Silver Shroud though. Sorry to ruin that for you. London! Assassin's Creed Syndicate. As someone who is intimately familiar with London, it was both a pleasure and a disappointment to play Assassin's Creed Syndicate. The game itself is just another run-of-the-mill Assassin's Creed, and while I loved visiting the locations of the game, they didn't exactly get it 100% right, such as claiming that Whitechapel is actually where Shoreditch is, but enough of that. But if you want a tour of Victorian London, then this is the game for you. You can see all of the iconic London landmarks, such as Big Ben and the Houses of Parliament, Tower Bridge, the Tower of London, St Paul's Cathedral, and the Bank of England. But unlike in that game, though you can visit all these places in real life, I doubt you will get away with climbing up any of them. Hong Kong! Sleeping Dogs. One of the more commonly known facts about Sleeping Dogs is that the in-game map is based on modern-day Hong Kong. Many of its streets will seem familiar to you should you ever go there, and some locations also appear in the game, such as the Bank of China Tower. I personally found Sleeping Dogs to be one of those really good games that everyone kind of forgets about over the years, but it's worth checking out, and for those of you who enjoyed the game and wanted more, well, there's always a trip to Hong Kong if you can afford it. Los Angeles! LA Noire. If any of you out there wasn't sure exactly where this game is set, then look forward to receiving your complimentary face palm and sympathetic pat on the back in the post soon. Yes, given the title of this game, this one takes place in Los Angeles, shortly after the Second World War in fact. And I have to say that they kept that place pretty well intact, including everything being in black and white, which we all know, the world was in black and white until colour TV came along and changed the game. But if you've never been to LA and are interested in what it's like, and you also have a copy of LA Noire sat on your shelf, then slap that mother in and take a look, cause quite a bit of it's there. Many landmarks, hotels, and if I remember correctly, I think some of the old restaurants that have survived to this day are even included in the game.
Mambo number 5.
Chicago! Watch Dogs. Despite the absolute letdown that was Watch Dogs 1, you can't deny that they did a relatively good job at recreating downtown Chicago in this one. You've got Willis Tower, the Millennium Park, and most of the city skyline looks kind of on point, maybe? Hell, it wouldn't surprise me if there were plenty of hackers over there too. And while I personally didn't think much of the game itself, I'd imagine that most would agree with me that the best part about Watch Dogs is its in-game map. Not exactly the best excuse to go and visit Chicago, but if you ever happen to be in that neighborhood, then let that thought enter your mind, and then exit your mind as quickly as it came. Kathmandu! Uncharted 2 Among Thieves. Pretty much an obvious one to have been included in an Uncharted game, and not surprisingly, Nathan Drake somehow manages to blow up parts of Kathmandu and Nepal and leaves the indigenous people slightly miffed at the outcome. But I assure you that if you're planning on making the trip over there and seeing all the beautiful temples, then be thankful that the natives have managed to rebuild everything after Drake left. But make sure to pay your respects while you're out there. There are certain things you can Kathmandu and others that you Catman don't. Yeah, this is the level of humour you've all been waiting for, wasn't it? Shinjuku! Yakuza series. Surprisingly, the area of Kamurocho that acts as the main area for most of the Yakuza series is heavily based on a real-life location, that being Shinjuku, which is the entertainment district of Tokyo in Japan. For anyone who's ever been to Shinjuku, then the similarities become apparent very quickly, with an emphasis on nightclubs, bars, arcades, girly stuff. Yes, you heard me correctly, most of that stuff you find in Yakuza can be found here. And while the random encounters and sub-stories are quite clearly not something you'd find in Shinjuku, it does seem to carry that same atmosphere. Also, you won't see any members of the Yakuza smashing bikes over people's heads, unless you're extremely unlucky. Or lucky. Miami! GTA Vice City. The GTA series is well known for creating its own sprawling metropolises that are, actually based on real-life locations. San Andreas and Liberty City being pretty obvious, but since those two have already been claimed on this list, I'm gonna have to give this entry to Vice City, which as you've probably already guessed, is based on Miami. Set during the 1980s, or as I like to call it, the golden age that I wasn't old enough to appreciate at the time thanks to being born near the end of the 80s, Vice City does showcase some locations and layouts that are almost identical to that of Miami, but with a few slightly changed names in places to get away with it being their own IP. Technically. Another one bites the dust. Another one bites the dust. Seattle! Infamous Second Son. One of the most accurate entries on this list, Infamous Second Son comes in as the last entry, and what's interesting about this one is that the developing team that made this game is actually based in Seattle too. As a result, what we got was an in-game map that does the real-life city justice, with many locations and attractions kept almost entirely intact, including the monorail and the iconic Space Needle. And while it's obvious for me to say that you won't get to do any cool superpower shit if you ever go there, or even if you live there, well, even if you live there, you don't need me telling you this. Or if you don't live there and you're just a normal human being, now that I think about it, you can still go and visit all of these places and maybe even find the areas where you've done missions in before. But for pretty much every reason and entry that you've seen during the course of this video, that is why all of these games are right here on this list. Now, if I'm not mistaken, that's another top 10 list done. But if you happen to live in Seattle and have cool superpower shit going on in your life, then like this video and all that jazz. Also, do me a favour and let everyone know that I'm back to making videos and that I have actually been here all this time. Believe it or not, but YouTube sucks and has been hiding all of my content. But the Grumpy Brit is still going strong, y'all. Anyway, Twitter. I'm still on Twitter, where you can find out which video is out next and when, and Patreon's still there if you want to support this channel further, and the links to both of those are in the description below. Anyway, have a great week everyone, and I'll catch you all next time. See ya! Sometimes I think this life is killing me.
Strange